Okay, exceptions to the warrant requirement. These mostly cover the home. We're going to cover the automobile exception in the next video. All right, here's our rule script. The Fourth Amendment draws a firm line at the entrance to a home. That comes to us from Kylo versus the United States. Remember the thermal imaging device? A warrant is needed unless an exception applies. So our base rule is the Fourth Amendment draws a firm line at the entrance to a home. Cite Kylo. A warrant is needed unless an exception applies. All right, now, what is our all-purpose defense to the Fourth Amendment? Oh, yes, it's consent. Consent searches. Consent must be what? That's right, freely and voluntarily given. So the police can search a home if consent is freely and voluntarily given. So here's our rule script. The Fourth Amendment draws a firm line at the entrance to a home. A warrant is needed unless an exception applies. One such exception is insert exception. Exception 1 is consent. Consent must be freely and voluntarily given. Our two buzzwords here are 1, lawful authority, and 2, common access and control. 1, lawful authority, and 2, common access and control. Okay, consent must be what? Freely and voluntarily given. And the person must have what? Lawful authority and common access and control. Okay, who has lawful authority? Somebody with the keys to the property, but not someone with like a landlord or an innkeeper. They cannot consent on your behalf. Your neighbors. You have to have lawful authority, meaning you must be a tenant there, or there must be at least apparent authority. So, for example, remember Illinois versus Rodriguez, when we have a woman who has keys to the apartment and says her boyfriend is sleeping there and he just beat her up. She had apparent authority. So there must be lawful or apparent authority and common access and control. Okay, this woman had the keys. She had common access and control. All right, so if one person consents and the other doesn't, you don't have consent. And remember, consent can be revoked when? That's right, at any time. So one person consents, the other says, get off my property, you do not have consent. They both consent, one person later revokes, you don't have consent. Okay, so how about common access and control? Let's go back to our home scenario. Common access, let's say we have a roommate situation. Common access would be to the family bedroom or the family room or the garage, but a private bedroom or a hotel room, no, you'd need consent of the person with the lawful authority and control over that property. But if you have common access to a common area, like a garage or a condo party room or whatever, you have common access to common areas. But remember, it's fact specific. Private bedrooms, hotel rooms, closets, there we don't have lawful authority and common access and control. Okay, consent, number 1 exception, an all-purpose defense to the Fourth Amendment. Consent must be, that's right, freely and voluntarily given. Do the police have to tell you you can refuse consent? No. And consent may be revoked? That's right, at any time. And our 2 prongs are 1, lawful authority, and 2, common access and control. Okay, let's move on to our next exception. Knock and announce. Okay, the police can justify a no-knock entry if, you know it, knocking and announcing would be dangerous or futile and result in the destruction of evidence. Police must knock and announce, but they may justify a no-knock entry to the home if knocking and announcing would be, that's right, dangerous or futile and result in the destruction of evidence. And if you don't knock and announce, police just kick the door down, The evidence still gets in. Evidence obtained in violation of knock and announce is still admissible. Okay, next exception, hot pursuit. What does it have to be? That's right, a fleeing felon. So on the bar, this has happened. We have a woman lying on the ground, and it looks like somebody stole her purse. Okay, so the police reasonably suspect a felony has occurred. They see the felon running away. Now they're in hot pursuit. The felon goes into his home and locks the door. Hot pursuit of a fleeing felon. The police can kick down the door, and they have the permission to make a warrantless entry to arrest. Hot pursuit is our third exception. So our first is consent. Second is no knock entry, when knocking and announcing would be dangerous or futile. Finally, we have hot pursuit of a fleeing felon, has to be reasonably believed to be a felon. Third, exigent circumstances. This is a great one because it's so broad. The exigent circumstances exception justifies warrantless entry because the exigencies of the situation mean immediate action is required. Okay, exigencies of the situation mean what? Immediate action is required. When does the search end? When the exigency ends. Next one, good faith. Good faith reliance on a defective warrant, also known as our honest mistake exception. Okay, emergency aid, to render emergency aid to a person in danger or trouble or injured. And our protective sweep. Okay, for a protective sweep, we do start with a valid warrant. For the protective sweep, I repeat, we do start with a valid warrant. The police may conduct a protective sweep to do what? Find third parties, other criminals, dangerous persons who are present. They can detain those third parties. They can pat down the people if they believe they're armed and dangerous. And of course, they can seize contraband or evidence in what? Plain view. But of course, they can't do what? Move stuff around, ransack your entire home, fiddle with objects in the room. That's not plain view. Okay. All right, let's go through our exceptions. Consent, freely and voluntarily given. We need what? Lawful authority. And 2, common access and control. Then there's our no knock entry, when knocking and announcing would be dangerous or futile and result in the destruction of evidence. Exigent circumstances. The exigencies of the situation mean immediate action is required. Hot pursuit of a fleeing what? Felon. You can make a warrantless entry. Good faith. Good faith reliance on a defective warrant, also known as honest mistake. Emergency aid, to do what? Render aid to an individual who is in danger or trouble. And finally, our protective sweep. What do we start with here? A valid warrant. The police are in the home on a valid warrant. They can make a protective sweep to do what? Look for third parties who might be armed and dangerous. Once they find them, they can detain them for the duration of the search. They can pat them down, and they can seize contraband or evidence in plain view, but they just can't move stuff, right? That's not plain view. Okay, one more thing about a protective sweep. You have a search warrant for the home. You get in there on a valid warrant. You can search. We're looking for a gun. We can search in any place where a gun might be found. But what if we're looking for a person? We can search in any place where a person might be found. This is important. Why? Because the police are looking, because the scope of the search depends on what you're searching for. If we're searching for a gun, probably you can look in a drawer or a purse. But if we're searching for a person, that's not carte blanche to go through the entire house. You have to confine your search to the scope of the warrant. You can't exceed the scope of the warrant, even on a protective sweep. Okay, finally, since we are discussing the home, we need to discuss curtilage and open fields. Of course, the curtilage of the home is anything that is intimately tied to the home. The closer it is to the home, the more protection. The further, the less covered, the less protection. And this is, of course, a fact specific inquiry. What if there's an easement? What if there's other lawful access or common access and control? A lawful vantage point, curtilage, is fact specific. What's curtilage? Intimately tied to the home. But what's definitely not curtilage? Oh, that's right, open fields. Open fields means there's no protection, there's no fence, there's nothing preventing the police from getting in there. Even if you have a hole in the fence, I've seen that be enough for open fields. Okay, and those are our exceptions to the warrant requirement for a home. What's our base rule? Oh, yes, the Fourth Amendment draws a firm line at the entrance to a home, Kylo versus the United States. A warrant is needed unless the exception applies. And our exceptions are 1, consent; 2, knocking and announcing would be dangerous or futile; 3, exigent circumstances; 4, hot pursuit of a fleeing felon; 5, good faith reliance on a defective warrant; 6, emergency aid; 7, protective sweep. And we always want to consider curtilage versus open fields. And there you go.